I am not willing to say that the comic book industry has fully turned the corner to where we're maybe on like a real rise, not only in popularity, but certainly in quality in comic books, where people can start feeling great about comics again and where the industry is going. But it does feel like some things might be happening to kind of maybe nudge us in that right direction. You know, we do have Ghost Machine going on right now. Every series has been good, and it's getting bigger. We got the Peter J. Tomasi stuff coming down the pike. That should be really good. The Energon universe is very, very hot. We haven't even gotten the Josh Williamson G.I. Joe series, which should open it up and make it even bigger and better. We do still have Miller World going at Dark Horse, which I think is very, very good. We have the Absolute Universe, which certainly Absolute Batman #1 was a hit. I think a lot of people liked it, and I agree with them. We'll see what the other Absolute Universe stuff happens there. But I do think an Absolute Batman series can get people back into the comic book shops, but maybe a little bit. And certainly Jim Lee coming back to Batman, that's a good thing. Jeff Loeb also coming back to the Batman series, that's a good move. Unfortunately, Marvel isn't really backing that up with their own versions of quality, but maybe DC and the indies can start pushing Marvel Comics to their leadership role and say, hey, now it's your turn to do something cool and badass before the comic book industry absolutely implodes and there's no coming back. Unfortunately, the people that have had to suffer through this the most, even more than you and I, the readers, and certainly me, the critic, who has to read a bunch of stuff that is just bad. You know, I read in between 18 and like 25 new comic books every single week. And yes, I do find the cream of the crop, the best of the best, but I have to go through a lot of the worst to get there. But certainly the people that have been infected the most in a very negative way, even more so than the readers ourselves, are comic book shop owners who are looking to build a business on this comic book industry, a thriving, not only business, but a place of community where people can go hang out. We talk about our favorite comic book stories, favorite heroes, all that kind of stuff. More and more, they're having to shift focuses away from comic books, you know, into Funko Pops, into T-shirts, into action figures, into tabletop gaming, and then this and that and everything in between, because comic books, quite frankly, aren't keeping up their end of the bargain, led by Marvel Comics, to where you can really have that awesome, thriving business anymore. And we are seeing the effects of that, but we are seeing some people actually make it out of here with their business intact. And I do want to talk about some of these stories, as well as some of the after effects of the hurricanes that have been experienced in the U.S. as of late. As you can imagine, it affected quite a few comic book shops. And I want to give one obviously terrible story, and then one story that I think is a lot more hopeful. But first, let's talk about a shop that unfortunately was not able to make it. For years, NYHC Comics thrived, hosting events like Hardcore in the 914 and countless others that brought together the community in celebration of their shared passions. But as time went on, the challenges began to mount: rising rents, the shifts from company to company, the impact of a changing economy started to take their toll. Despite the loyal customer base and their tireless efforts of families who own it, the financial strain has become too much to bear. The decision was made. The families gathered in the back room, surrounded by stacks of comics and memorabilia, to discuss the future. Tears were shed and memories were shared. We knew that closing the store would be like saying goodbye to a piece of our hearts. And that is, quite frankly, like heartbreaking to read. I hate it's so sad to see somebody's, you know, life's work. You know, you have a passion for something like comic books or whatever it is. You know, it's something that you've always been interested in. You wanted to be a part of it your whole life. You finally open up NYHC Comics, and unfortunately, it doesn't end up making it, you know, out the back, and, you know, having to close it down early. You know, and these stories have become far too commonplace. You almost can't keep up with them, you know, with the amount of shops that are kind of closing down. And a lot of times they don't even announce it. They just kind of go out of business. And it's kind of happening, it seems like, all over America. You know, the financial times are not very, very good. We did get through the pandemic, which had a lot of weird reactions to it, the way that they decided to, I guess, mitigate risk of the populace by shutting everything down and sending people home and telling them to stay there. Obviously, that took an enormous toll on small businesses nationwide, really worldwide. We certainly experienced it here in the Philippines as well. I know I have quite a few friends here that ended up losing their businesses during COVID, because we were also basically interned into our houses and told you can't leave, you know, without like this fucking ID and stuff like that. But certainly the rising inflation, what does that cause? Rising, you know, rent payments, rising bills, rising, you know, house payments, and all those types of things. They do eventually take their toll. And unfortunately, despite your best efforts, as a small business owner, not everyone is going to make it. Even, comic book shops in big cities like New York, like NYHC, that you would think would have an enormous audience in there, they're not quite able to make it out the other side. So it always sucks, and you hate even talking about it or covering it, but it has become quite commonplace these days, despite the years upon years that we were told that this is the best comic book industry ever. Yeah, it was the best comic book industry ever for Amazon and Barnes and Noble. They were doing great, and I'm certain that there were local comic book shops that had the best years ever, but we've kind of covered the numbers. That wasn't exactly what most comic book shops were experiencing. A lot of them were actually experiencing losses in revenue from the previous year, or even stale revenue where they weren't going up or they weren't going down. They were just kind of staying level, which can be okay unless you have rapid inflation going on. And obviously, with the way that the financial climate is, it doesn't work out for everybody. Now, we've got a little bit of a nicer story here. This one actually works out in the end. Desert Island Comics, the Brooklyn, New York-based comic shop, is reportedly being priced out of its storefront, which is occupied since 2008. It will lose its lease on December 30th, per a letter dated September 26th and posted to the store's Instagram account on October 3. Shortly after announcing the impending eviction, Desert Island Comics launched a GoFundMe seeking $79,200 to keep the store in its location for another 3 years. A 3-year lease will be a total of $201,600, and we are $79,200 short, he wrote. These are projected amounts based on our current ability to pay versus actual projected rent. We are trying to raise this deficit by October 15th in an effort to remain in business. Full disclosure, there is a chance that we could move to another location. In that case, these funds would finance the transition, build out a new lease. And as you can likely see by the image produced there of the GoFundMe, they reached their goal of $79,200 and even more. I believe it went well over $90,000 already. So Desert Island Comic Books is actually going to be able to make it. Hopefully they will be there for a minimum of 3 more years. It sounded like there was another company that went in there in kind of a predatory manner and offered the storefront owner like double the rent that they were actually already paying. And the storefront owner said, hey, we don't technically have a lease here. You're going to have to vacate the premise unless you can also meet what they're offering for rent. And it sounded like it was going to be like a liquor store or something like that. Like, we need more liquor stores. We don't need more liquor stores. We don't need more script clubs. We need more comic book shops and buffets. That's what we need, a buffet in a comic book shop that has lobster with some fucking barbecued ribs. You'd be like eating that, and you're like, oh, God, do not touch my comics, man. What are you doing? You got barbecue sauce all over my fucking Iron Man collection. What are you doing, dude? You're the worst customer we have. Probably not something like that. But we do need more local comic book shops, and it's awesome to see the ingenuity and the way that people are able to kind of rally the troops, get the word out there, and make it a success. We've certainly seen this time and time again. Lots of GoFundMes out there for comic book shops. And a lot of times they do end up making it because it is a tight-knit community. It is an awesome community of people that want local comic shops to exist. We don't want this stuff to go extinct. And it's nice to see that people were able to go out there and support Desert Island Comics to the tune of almost $100,000. And as far as I know, the GoFundMe is still up, so it might actually get there. And I think that was a really cool story. So, boom, go out there. You got to hustle. You got to get the word out. And we got to keep these awesome places of comic book culture alive, because a lot of people would like comic book shops to shut down. It's like the quiet little secret within the comic book industry itself. They think comic customers and comic shops are lowbrow, and they want to be highbrow entertainment, and they would like everything to basically just come out in trades and graphic novels. And that way, I don't write comic books, I write graphic novels. See, I am a distinguished gentleman. And I almost poked my eye out there. That was kind of weird. But it is 4:30 a.m. here in the Philippines. I'm recording later than normal because I did have an enormous internet outage today that was very unexpected. But I am still getting to this because I wanted to talk about it so much. But a lot of people would like to see that part of the comic book culture close down and close up shop with wooden planks saying, close for business on comic book shops, so they can just be strictly in Barnes and Noble and on Amazon and in Walmart and stuff like that. And then therefore they wouldn't have to consider themselves comic book writers. We are in the graphic novel industry or something like that. A lot of bougie motherfuckers out there. They think they're too good for us. You ain't better than nobody. No, I did mention there were some hurricanes going on, and we do have one very, very sad story to talk about. Main Street Comics and Games in Marshall, North Carolina, which opened in 2021, was damaged and its stock destroyed when Hurricane Helene caused the French Broad River to overflow its banks and flood the town, cresting at 22 feet. The flooding destroyed the store's stock and left it filled with mud and toxic muck from the industry upstream. The owners have set up a GoFundMe to help the store recover, and they are asking that those affected by the flood not donate, but instead share the fundraiser on social media. And as you can see, likely from the graphic, at least when I recorded this and I created this video, the GoFundMe had not quite met its goal. It was pretty close, but it hadn't quite met there. I think the goal was actually 25,000. It was closer to 19,000. But you see the picture, and it's just so terrible, and everything's so gross and dirty, and it looks like everything was destroyed, including the entire stock of comic books that they had, even like the stuff, what they had stored, all was destroyed in that. And, you know, me personally, I'm from Missouri, and I remember that. Do you guys remember this? The floods in, like, I think it was 1990? Maybe it was 91. But, man, I remember, like, there was a town maybe like 7 miles away from my little town where I grew up, and then it got flooded out again. They actually ended up having to move it like 1.5 miles away from where it was originally located because it was kind of in a flood area, and they were tired of, like, rebuilding the city or whatever. And I remember I was driving to I wasn't driving. My brother was driving to my father's house, and I was riding with him. And we were riding on this road that normally had fields on either side, but it looked like we were literally driving through an enormous lake because the road was up, and both sides of it were completely flooded. And that's crazy. There's lots of floods here too in the Philippines as well. Always seeing people getting flooded out because it's very hilly country here. And they don't have a lot of good infrastructure when it comes to diverting waters and such things. So, you know, hate to see all the devastation and the people affected by the flood. And of course, as you would imagine, comic book shops were things that were affected. And of course, everything in a comic book shop, if it gets wet, it's basically destroyed. And it looks like Main Street Comics and Games are going to make a go of it, try to rebuild and keep their storefront in Marshall, North Carolina. Hopefully it works out for them. I'm certainly, you know, hoping and praying and rooting for those guys for it to work out for them. There's another shop out there, fortunately, that weren't quite as impacted like that, but they were able to impact their own community. Life is a semblance of normal. Morgan's Comics of Asheville, North Carolina, posted on their Facebook after Hurricane Helene did a number on their town. The store has been open during regular hours and has been serving as a distribution site for donated diapers, food, toys, and personal products, as well as a place for people to drop in, charge their phones, and decompress a bit. Owner Morgan Wells Albertron also posted a video with links to emergency assistance, and the store offers entertainment for kids while the adults apply for aid. Man, that is a really cool story, you know, with all the stuff that happens. And it sounds like Morgan's Comics wasn't affected to the degree of a lot of its neighbors, you know, Asheville, North Carolina, and even surrounding towns and stuff like that, to where they were able to use their storefront as a place for people to come, you know, gather around, decompress a little bit, you know, look, you know, apply for aid, have something there for the kids to do, you know, a little place of solace, you know, letting you know that people still cared out there. And I think that's what makes comic book shops cool, is that we're always looking out for each other. It doesn't surprise me in the least that you have a comic book shop out there in an affected area that was very blessed, you know, to not be shut down and have everything destroyed, go out of their way to go out there and help out the community and do their best to assist people in a time of need. So I thought that was a really cool story that I wanted to get there as well. But it's hard times. Local comic book shops need our support more now than ever. You know, it kind of sucks here being in the Philippines because there quite frankly isn't a local comic book shop on my island. If I want to go to one, I actually have to fly to Manila, or I could take 2 ferries and finally get to Manila if I take a bus. You know, it ends up being like 18 hours or something like that. So if you do have a local comic book shop in your area, consider yourself blessed, because not all of us out there actually have that awesome, you know, place to go and commune and be a part of the geek culture and all that kind of stuff. And definitely support your comic book shops, because there's a lot of people that would like to see local comic book shops go away. I'm not joking about the we write graphic novels bull crap. You know, it's one of those quiet little secrets that they don't want to tell you, but they certainly tell you with their actions out there. And I personally think that abandoning local comic book shops is ridiculous. And I made a video about it right here talking about a lot of this stuff. If you haven't seen this, definitely check it out, and let's support local comic book shops every step of the way.